Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first panel discussion. As I'm sure you know, we're a little pressed for time, but we have a great deal to talk about. So I would ask you all to take your seats. 83% of European Union citizens think it's important to help people in developing countries. Yet only 6% know what the Millennium Development Goals are. And 53% say they know nothing about where EU aid goes. In this panel discussion, we will talk about one of the main aims of this year of European development, which is to introduce and talk about these issues with European citizens, convince them that they have to get involved and be active with them. And we have a very distinguished panel here to talk about these issues. As I said, unfortunately, we're a little pressed for time, so I'll be watching that as people talk. But I hope we can get all the important points across. And as our first speaker is Mr. Karmenu Vella. He is the European Commissioner for Environment, Maritime Affairs and Fisheries. He has extensive experience in politics in his native Malta, where he held a number of ministerial portfolios and has been a member of Parliament from 1976 to 2014. Mr. Vella, please.
Thank you very much, Madam President, colleagues, ministers, members of the European Parliament, and ladies and gentlemen. Well, I have to congratulate, first of all, the Latvian presidency for this initiative, and I think it is a very strong opening to the Latvian presidency and a real sign of their commitment to succeed in leading towards a more sustainable agenda. Progress during this year will obviously require a lot of leadership and also a sense of purpose, and I am certain that they will get all the support in the same sense from the European Commission as well. As the President has this morning already signaled how urgent the challenges are and how seriously they should be taken. And I think that this week's presence of a number of members of our college confirms that the Commission has a deep understanding of the progress needed and that the progress can only be achieved if strategies and policies and tasks are coordinated and also aligned. Our shared task is to obviously identify and articulate in one voice and deliver a common European Union position. The EU has been recognized as a leader in this debate, and our job is to retain and to strengthen this reputation. Yesterday, I think it was Mr. Donald Tusk who said that 1 or 2 weeks after New Year's is when the resolve of New Year's resolutions tend to start waning. But such weakening and determination is certainly not an option for us. For the European Commission, the commitment to the year of development will not only last the full year, but will continue very well beyond. When we talk about development, or better still, when we talk about sustainable development, we must make certain that our own agenda for sustainable growth, jobs and investment must tally with the global post-2015 Sustainable Development Goals. The EU must continue to lead and not simply engage in the post-2015 agenda. We need to be strong and we need to be united. And we need to deliver through a collective spirit of commitment and responsibility. And over and above all, I think that we have to lead by example. On the environment, for instance, the EU has long been ahead of anyone else in the implementation of internationally set goals. We are on track on the Kyoto targets on emissions. Our rules go beyond the CITES agreement, and our ambitions go well beyond the recent Lima Accord. On climate change, a new framework is to be finalized this year, and it is up to other potential global and regional leaders to come forward with targets in the next few months. And one of this Commission's priorities is the ocean governance and blue growth opportunities. The fact that this is one of the proposed sustainable development goals is, I think, a very positive step. But we have to make no mistake that this should only be seen as the starting point. We have made enormous progress in drafting shared standards on how we manage our planet's land resources, but we cannot ignore our oceans resources, which make up the other 70% of the Earth's surface. If we are really interested and if we are really concerned about 30% of our planet, which is the land, then we certainly have to be more concerned about the other 70% of our planet as well. And our understanding and recognition of the influence and opportunities which the world's oceans present to us grows year on year, and our potential use of oceans resources is becoming more relevant and necessary than ever before. The shared aim should be an implementing agreement on the UN law of the seas, also covering biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction. The need to collectively protect these oceans resources should also happen in parallel. There are aspects, such as the access to marine genetic resources, that are in urgent need of attention from the international community. And a lot is already being done by the EU to safeguard these resources, but more and a lot more needs to be done both at EU and global level. This year, we will again see the EU committed to sustainable development with our biodiversity strategy, the water blueprint, and the circular economy. Years ago, the EU made a conscious effort to bring all the policies affecting the sea into an integrated maritime policy. It was an eye-opener. Attitudes shifted, national policy making changed, and the EU's own vision and effectiveness were also transformed. Today, we have sea basin strategies, we have cross-border planning of marine space, and we have better tools for maritime surveillance. We also have a stronger voice and influence in the international fora when it comes to maritime policies. And we must see that influence to highlight that sustainability and environmental protection are both essential for poverty eradication as well as for economic growth. The Europe 2020 strategy puts sustainable, smart and inclusive growth at the center of EU policies. And the 7th EAP, the Environmental Action Programme, specifically sets out a roadmap for achieving this. Addressing the challenge of growth, we have to factor in the element of competitiveness, and to help achieve competitiveness, we need to improve our resource efficiency and reduce our resource deficit. Today, if a member state has a financial deficit higher than 3% of GDP, we immediately raise the red flags, and rightly so. But shouldn't we do the same thing when considering that the European Union has a resource deficit of 23%? And this is where realistic goals and legislation on the circular economy could help mitigate our resource deficit and strengthen our competitive, whilst at the same time improve our development sustainability. Just as we strive for a AAA-rated economy, we must also unequivocally strive for a AAA-rated environment, both domestically as well as globally. For this reason, the achievement of sustainable development will depend a lot on how much global leaders are prepared to commit themselves. And here, I refer not only to political leaders, but equally so to entrepreneurs, policymakers, NGOs, and a number of other stakeholders, including also citizens themselves. So, one of our priorities in 2015 will be that of raising awareness to the fact that sustainable development is everybody's business, that in today's interdependent world, each and every one of us is responsible, and ultimately each and every one of us will benefit from the state of the environment that day on day we work and we live in. We have to make it very clear that achieving growth, reducing poverty, and preserving our environment are not separate silos, but are part and parcel of the same agenda. Today we have to understand that the environment is part of the solution and not as regarded by some part of the problem. To conclude, the European Commission reaffirms its commitment to the European Year for Development. Our efforts for stronger action at home are also coupled and should be also coupled by our determination to foster a higher support at global level. The concept of environmental protection is not only a social imperative but also an economic opportunity. Our economic recovery will last longer if it protects the natural capital upon which it depends. There is no such thing as a strong economy, as a strong development in a weak ecosystem. Our commitment towards economic development is strengthened by our responsibility to ensure the highest environmental standards and protection. And this is also a moral commitment to future generations. Let us not forget that the livelihood and the quality of life of future generations depend entirely on our present success in achieving our goals. If we really care for our children and for our grandchildren, then let us not fail them. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Vella. I just want to say to everybody who's watching on live stream, and also maybe somebody in the audience, that there's an opportunity. I hope I'll have a chance to address some questions to the panelists. I hope so. And you can send them by Twitter, marking them with a hashtag EYD 2015. But our next speaker is Ms. Keit Pentus-Rosimannus, and she is the Estonian Minister of Foreign Affairs. She's been involved in politics since she was a university student and has held a wide variety of positions in both municipal and national government. And before becoming Minister of Foreign Affairs, she was the Minister of the Environment for 3 years. Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam President, dear Commissioner, and dear friends. First, I have to start with a little bit sad tone and sending my deep condolences to our French friends for the shocking terrorist attack. And I just want to say that our thoughts have been and will be with the French until the persons responsible for that unhuman act will be caught and brought into justice. The European Year of Development is starting in a very restless time, and the security situation has in fact changed dramatically, and unfortunately will most probably be one of the main topics or will remain focus during the 2015. In fact, I think it is impossible to improve the security situation in long run without focusing also to the development assistance. And this is one of the reasons why I think that also today's discussion is here a very important one. I also find it highly symbolic that the European Year of Development 2015 is officially launched or promulgated here in Riga. Latvia, as well as Estonia, has undergone a successful transformation from recipient to a donor country not too long ago. And that is why we know from our own relatively recent experience how important concrete targets and goals are for a developing state. We can also appreciate the value of assistance provided by other countries for reaching these goals and targets. If I could today highlight only three things that I think were crucial for us, for Estonia, then those three things would be first, a hunger in society for a sustainable good life, or for sustainable better life in society, but also concrete priorities and also help from others. I think these three things have contributed to our development and are able to help other countries to achieve the same or even more. During the upcoming year, and in fact during the coming years, the scarcity of the resources, just as previous speaker noted, and the need to do more with less, to do more and to use more effectively the resources we have will be one of the top issues. And here I would like to underpin also, again, from our own experiences, that although the scarcity of resources is rather inconvenient, it also very often forces societies and people to be more innovative and more effective in problem solving. In fact, that is how in Estonia the government e-services system have developed. For us, there was a very concrete need to do more with less, to create a very open, very effective system, and this is how the e-services developed. It has helped enormously our society also when it comes to the effective resource use. And we are very delighted to share our best practices to our development partner countries now. I also agree very much with previous speakers who have said that it is hard to overrate the importance of quality education, empowering women economically and also politically, availability of health system, health services, and employment as part of the basic rights. But I also want to highlight that it is, especially for the politicians, it is very known that if one government, if one country finances the development cooperation from its state budget, it is very clear that there is a need for support from the public, from our own people. And my experience says that people or the public can support things they understand, just as the last presentation from the previous panel showed us. And how we can reach that, or what we can do to that. I think one key for sure is to explain in more detailed ways how the development projects really help to solve very concrete problems, how the environmental investments really help to improve health, for example, or to increase the life expectancy. How, again, very concretely it helps to improve the life quality, which also means how it helps to create more secure world. So to conclude, I just hope that this today's debate, but also the whole year of development, helps us to promote the development related debates with our citizens, to ask very honest questions and to get very strict feedback. And to really conclude, or finally, I just need to say to our dear neighbors that from Estonian side, we wish you really all the best and good luck with your presidency. And since our presidency is still ahead in 2018, we are really hoping to learn from you, starting from today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pentus-Rosimannus. Our next speaker is Vaira Vīķe-Freiberga. She was the president of Latvia from 1999 to 2007. And in 2007, she was named vice president of the Reflection Group on the long-term future of the EU, and she is the chair of the high-level group on freedom and pluralism in media in the EU, and continues to be very active in international affairs. Ms. Freiberga, please.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, en vos titres et qualités, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to begin with a few words of condolence and sympathy to the French people for the tragedy which struck France, a country which represents freedom of thought and freedom of expression as fundamental European values. I think indeed these sad events show how important it is that we continue our work to convince our citizens, wherever they come from, whatever their origins may be, to show them that we all share this belief in human dignity and in human rights, the most fundamental of which is the right to life. Difference of opinions, difference of convictions should not and cannot in any way justify taking somebody else's life.
Of the reflection. When I was part of the reflection group on the future of Europe, we looked at the models of development in Europe and found that there is not one single model, but at least 5 different ones, all of them actually, when we deposited the report in 2009, working rather nicely, except that the crisis of 2008 had already hit us, and Europe started feeling that the model it had adopted since the end of the Second World War needed some adjustment to adapt itself to the challenges of the modern world. The growth in Europe had been based on post-war reconstruction, on the help of the Marshall Plan, and on the growth of science and technology. And may I use this brief opportunity to reiterate what the scientists and researchers of Europe have been saying to the European Commission and to the Council of Europe. Please do not forget to support adequately fundamental research in Europe. The advances that Europe has made have been due in large measure to the contributions of really cutting-edge, leading scientific discoveries, which have then transformed themselves into technological adaptations and which have then been to the benefit of populations at large because of their applications. This is a two-way street. Both the practical world and the business world needs to do practical and applied research. Governments do applied social research, but we do need fundamental research so that we can understand better where we are and where we're going. The principle of growth as a basis for European prosperity has always been accompanied by a very fundamental principle of solidarity. And solidarity and redistribution, or rather the sharing of wealth between those who have more and those who have less. And this is not the old Marxist idea or Robin Hood's idea of taking from the rich and giving to the poor, although partly there is such an element in it. But it's rather a way of making sure that the poor find ways of becoming more prosperous, and that we do not have any poor who are left behind in society. That is the whole point. I'm pleased to hear, and we were all, I think, pleased to hear this morning how the Millennium Development Goals of the United Nations that were announced in 2000, the year around 2000, by now in 2015, largely have been successful in many fields. However, a great deal, of course, remains to be done. About Europe specifically, we do have inequalities between different strata of society, which still remain even on our wonderful continent. The Gini indexes and so on show that the gap between the richest and the poorest in our societies is not narrowing as much as we would like, or is not narrowing at all. In many countries it's growing. This is something that should be remedied. We should have more social solidarity in our societies and ensuring that everybody, including the young, have access to jobs. The second thing we find is that the protection of workers, for instance, such as it was envisaged in earlier years, in many ways has been the protection of jobs. Anybody who gets a job is sure of having it. but young people then have difficulty of access to getting them. This is why we have high youth unemployment. And finally, the solidarity we'd like to see it between, first of all, European countries, so that we do not think of the North and the South as being different, nor the new countries against old, even though 10 years have gone by since the new ones have been entering the Union, and not between East and West either, and certainly not with the rest of the world. So solidarity, I think, and development go hand in hand, and certainly we at the Club de Madrid, over 100 former heads of state and government, have been working for a long time, and will continue to do so, about working for shared societies, both at home and everywhere else in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, President Freiberga. Our next speaker is Mr. Romain Schneider. He is the Minister of Development Cooperation and Humanitarian Affairs of Luxembourg. Please, Mr. Schneider.
Merci bien, Messieurs les commissaires.
Thank you very much indeed, dear friends, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to also begin with expressing our sympathy towards France, and especially to the family and loved ones of the victims. I think the key point is that all this sympathy, the outpouring of sympathy in Europe and worldwide, shows that we all want to return to peace as soon as possible.
In English, and I would at first thank very much, Latvia, for the invitation to come here to this panel and for the opening of the European Year for Development. It's that a really true example of close cooperation and collaboration and dialogue between two presidencies, with two very different countries, with very different EU backgrounds. Luxembourg development cooperation policy is 30 years old. Latvia's is much more recent. We have very different partner countries. Luxembourg has partner countries in Africa, Asia and Central America, whereas Latvia looks rather to the east. The similarities, however, are more striking, and this is why we are all gathered here today as member states of the European Union. We all strive to disperse our aid efficiently and coherently in our partner countries. We all aim to obtain concrete results with the money spent on helping those less fortunate than youth outside the EU borders. The European Year of Development is a unique opportunity for us, European institutions, governments, presidency countries, local governments, NGOs and general public to raise awareness about the importance and necessity of development cooperation as well as what it achieves. Development cooperation and humanitarian aid is an integral part of Luxembourg's foreign policy. Development cooperation is not a luxury that we can offer when all is well, but an integral part of our global responsibility. This is a message we need to pass on to our fellow citizens. I'm particularly proud that Luxembourg has continued its commitment to spending 1% of GNI for development aid. In times of economic slowdown, where budgets and public spending are cut, it may be tempting to reduce development aid and public support is waning. Initiatives such as the European Year of Development encourage governments to stick to their commitments and must bring to citizens the importance of continued development cooperation. This is why a communication initiative is timely now, especially at the eve of finalizing negotiations on the post-2015 development framework and the upcoming climate summit in Paris in December. To achieve our common goal, all must work together. Communication can only be efficient if coherent messages are widely shared. The European Year of Development or for Development has already demonstrated results. I'm above all delighted of the close collaboration with Latvia in setting up common activities for the European Year of Development. And so we are used to create new partnerships. We have to reach new target audiences. We have to reach new public. We have to reach new persons and further young persons in the social society. I think that this spirit can help us to use this year for development 2015 to reach all our challenges and to reach all our goals we put and to bring together this need we need in a lot of regions of the world. So let's use this year 2015 to find new partners to do these challenges together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider, for that very concentrated and invigorating remarks. Our next speaker now is Isabella Lövin. She is the Minister for International Development Cooperation in Sweden.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, commissioners, dear colleagues, ministers, guests, and not least the viewers that are looking now online. Je suis Charlie. I'm also happy to be here in Riga, invited to this panel, not only as the Swedish Minister of Development Cooperation, but also as a representative of Sweden's new red-green government. The horrendous attacks in Paris reminds us of the importance of this year. 2015 is a fantastic year to start as a new Minister of International Development Cooperation, because this is the year of almost endless possibilities as well as challenges. But we have the possibility to set the agenda for development cooperation and for the development of the world in the decades to come. The Secretary General of the UN puts it really clearly in his synthesis report that was published recently. He writes, "We are on the threshold of the most important year of development since the founding of the United Nations itself. The stars are aligned for the world to take historic action and transform lives and protect the planet." But then he reminds us also that armed conflict, crime, terrorism, persecution, corruption, impunity, and the erosion of law are daily realities, and the consequences of climate change have only just begun. All these challenges are man-made, as someone mentioned this morning already. And we also have the know-how and the means to address these challenges, but we need urgent leadership and joint action now. So that the special European year is focusing on development this year could not be more timely. We need to make all Europeans aware of the important global processes that are going on. The new Sustainable Development Goals, the financing for development conference, but also, absolutely not least, the climate conference in Paris. All these three conferences will not only be decisive for development work in the decades to come, but are also opportunities to have broad global discussions on what societies we really want to have. And to ask ourselves, why are we not achieving these societies? 2015 is the year for a real global checkup visit. How is our world doing? What are the desired parameters to measure global environmental and social health? According to the Open Working Group, there are 17 parameters and 169 sub-goals. So what programs and means do we need in order to achieve our desired 17 Sustainable Development Goals? This is the discussion, not only for politicians, but for society as a whole, for organizations, for intellectuals, for young people, for old people, for artists and cartoonists. One of the most fundamental ways to achieve a really sustainable world would be to have the climate agreement we hope for in Paris. Without reducing CO2 emissions to zero within this century, we will not have a sustainable world, whatever we try to do in other fields. Climate change will cause droughts and sea level rise, hurricanes, desertification, floodings, and destruction of farmland. We will see hunger, conflicts over resources, climate refugees. I agree with Secretary of State John Kerry when he called climate change a weapon of mass destruction. The climate discussion must therefore be at the heart of the EU Year of Development. The Financing for Development Conference will be hugely interesting in this discussion because it will highlight the need to use all our financial means, tax revenues, business growth, institutional capital, as well as development aid, to direct it towards a sustainable development. As the Climate Economy report from the World Bank showed recently, the world already has the financial means for a transition. We are going to invest $90 trillion in the next 15 years in infrastructure, for example. We just need to direct and decide in what infrastructure we're going to invest. In solar power or in offshore oil drilling in the Arctic. Taking it down to a personal level, and someone just mentioned New Year's resolutions. Are we going to buy healthy foods that is good for us, or junk food and candy? It costs the same, but the result will be really different. We have the money globally, we just have to decide how to make it serve us, not ourselves be the servants of it.
Ms. Lövin, I'm sorry.
To finalize, I'm proud to say that the Swedish citizens rate extremely high on the Eurobarometer, which shows that 2/3 of EU citizens thinks that development aid and rich countries can actually help poor countries, where the figure for Sweden is 97% really believes that rich countries can do this. We have set ourselves a target of 1% of GDP going to development aid, and we are fulfilling this. However, the Swedish domestic policy for coherence for development is maybe the most important contribution to sustainable development. We adopted it already in 2003 and have been pushing for the EU also to implement it in its Lisbon Treaty recently. So we cannot achieve sustainable development if we are doing different policies where one is counteracting the other. We can't give aid on one hand to a poor fisherman in Africa and with the other hand take away fishing possibilities for him when the EU buys access to its own fishing fleets in the same country's waters. This is not coherent, and this is exactly what policy coherence for development is about. Using all policy areas to strive for a more sustainable and just global world. So to end up, I think the EU Year of Development must be focused not only on what development policies are achieving, but how all policies must be used as means to achieve the SDGs. Fisheries, trade, gender equality policy, ocean governance, agriculture, the fight against tax havens. The Secretary General called in his synthesis report, he called it the road to dignity by 2030. And I hope that 2015 will be the year when Europe, together with its citizens, takes the world on that road so we actually achieve the dignified world we want to have by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lövin. Our next speaker is Annick Girardin. She is the Minister of State for Development and Francophonie of France.
Mesdames et messieurs,
Ladies and gentlemen commissioners, ladies and gentlemen ministers, dear delegates, allow me to begin by thanking you for all the expressions of sympathy. France has been very hard hit by this terrible outrage, but we cannot give in to depression or defeatism. It's because we share strong values, the values of the Republic, that we will be able to face up to this terrorist threat. And we will fight fanaticism and terrorism with the necessary determination and courage in the 21st century to create a safer and more equal world. As the President of France, Mr. Hollande, said that our values will always be stronger than barbarism. We have been able to, in the past, to unite around our values and defeat their enemies, the values of liberty, equality, fraternity, the motto of the French Republic. As the Prime Minister of Latvia mentioned yesterday in opening, or this morning rather, in opening our European Year for Development. I would like to add the values of a secular republic. These are the values of France, but also of Europe, which are the heart of our European project. And so, despite the National Day of Mourning in France, I did nonetheless want to take part in this historic event in two main respects. Firstly, in that it is Latvia's first presidency of the European Union, and it is also the first time that a European year is focused on the external activities of the European Union. This is all the more important, all the more appropriate at a time when there are doubts about our common values, at a time when Europe, unfortunately, is becoming a scapegoat. The European Union is a scapegoat for austerity policies, at a time when obscurantist and fanatical groups are attacking us. And France has just suffered to that effect. It's all the more important that we not lose sight of our ideals and our principle of solidarity, which is at the heart of the European Union. That is why we can be proud that the European Union is first in the world in terms of the amount of aid we provide to the rest of the world. But are our European citizens really aware of this? Are they aware of the aid that we provide? And in this year, the European Year for Development, is an opportunity to put across that message.
Because we have a press conference coming. But
c'est un peu particulier de me couper comme ça. Je crois que honnêtement.
Rather peculiar, perhaps, to cut me off in the middle of my intervention. I just want to remind us of this principle that it's essential to put across this message about our global development vision. And this is essential in terms of our values of democracy and development and equality. Despite the lack of time, I would just say that it is very important to focus on the element of the long-term element in our approach. We've seen this in Mali, we've seen this Democratic Republic of Congo with the Ebola epidemic. It is essential to be able to rebuild our societies, to strengthen our democracies. It is with all the democratic countries which we will be facing up to the challenge of creating a more just world. If we look at the two main events coming up in this field, the post-2015 development objectives, and also the climate, the Year of the Climate in Paris, which is an important year for France and for Europe and the rest of the world. We want a worldwide agreement, an ambitious, innovative agreement, and we have to put ambition at the heart of what we are doing. And this must be at the heart of what we are seeking to achieve. Just to briefly conclude, I would say that there is hope, and we have to carry the banner of hope, we in Europe, the European member states. And I would just conclude in saying that we can perhaps remind ourselves of the motto of Europe, united in diversity. I think that could really be a leitmotif for what we're doing today and or in the course of this year. United in diversity, but this is how we will face up to the challenges of development in terms of combating poverty and making the world a better place, and also facing up to the challenge of climate and terrorism. Thank you.
I'm very sorry that we don't have any more time. I've been told by the organizers that we have to stop right now. I've invited Seamus to take part in the next panel, if that's all right with him, because we really have to stop to be able to do to do the press conference. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much to the panel. You've been very patient with my reminders about time. I apologize for that, but that's the schedule we have. Thank you again. So there's a press conference starting here now. So if the people who are not taking part in the press conference, if we could all go out and we could meet here again at 3 o'clock for the second panel. Thank you very much.